Welcome to it, guys. Here we go. UAP Studies Podcast, episode 1 of 2 for A Tear in the Sky, which is a new movie that's just come out, highly anticipated. And we have a couple of the stars from that movie. We have David Altman and David Mason. So before we bring them on the show, joining me as usual, of course, my illustrious co-host, Jason Gilmet. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing very good today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. We had a chance to watch the movie. And we want to discuss obviously what went into that, but also just get to know these guys on a personal level. If you did see the film, you know that they're both very talented and, right choices for this type of thing. But for the sake of ease, I think we're going to refer to Dave Altman as David and Dave Mason as Dave, because this is going to get real confusing otherwise. So David Altman and Dave Mason. Yeah. So welcome to the show, David Altman and Dave Mason.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So we'll start with David Altman. Tell us a little bit about sort of yourself, your history. I know when I checked you out on Facebook, I saw a lot of talent scout for like Sony Records, Virgin. So clearly you're in the music world, but what got you into the UAP phenomenon, and then kind of what got you into this film, or how did you stumble across the opportunity?
I think what got me into the phenomenon was that when my parents got divorced when I was like 7 or 8, my mom and I went to go live with my grandmother. And she was a librarian at the local library. And my mom would be working when I got off to school. So I'd go to the library and she would sit me down in the science fiction section, which was right by the Bigfoot books and the UFO books. And that's kind of how I got started in that. So I started in the music business. I was in the music business for like 20 years at least. I managed bands, I tour managed bands. I managed bands like Newfound Glory. I worked for pretty much every label. I mean, like you were saying, I mean, Virgin, Interscope, Sony, all of them. I did A&R work and scouting for new talent. And then when the music business died, I kind of just floated around, and I got into working in TV, which is what I do now. And I work as a consultant on pretty much any UFO show that's on. I worked on the J.J. Abrams series. I worked on the TMZ special, all that stuff. And I also do development, which is where we actually create new shows, which is my main thing right now. I'm working on, I think, 4 or 5 different new shows for that. So how I got involved with the movie. I'm friends with Ben Hansen, and Ben knows Caroline, and Caroline asked Ben, she was like, "Hey, I'm going to do my next movie, what should I do it on?" And Ben said, "Talk to Dave Altman." And then Caroline called me or hit me up on Facebook. Then we called each other, and then here we are.
Awesome. So yeah. Dave Mason, you finally got your background figured out. You must be happy about that.
Yes.
And if anyone who's watched the movie, they know that you're obviously a brilliant mind. Some of the inventions that are featured on the show blew my mind. I'm a science-minded guy, and we'll talk a bit about that later on. But again, tell us a bit about your background. What got you into this? Clearly, you've been doing this since a kid, probably, with inventing and creating and tinkering. And so tell us a little bit about yourself, and then what got you involved with the movie.
Okay, so I got involved as a kid. I remember checking out books at the library about UFOs, and you kind of did that in secret, and you didn't tell your friends. It was like a real taboo subject. So I really got intrigued by it. And when I was 13, I built a UFO detector based on a compass. And what this compass did is, if you just had it set up, I had a phototransistor and an LED and an alarm circuit that would trigger off the activity of the compass needle. And so I was already learning electronics at a very young age. I started studying it when I was 5. My parents gave me a soldering iron, and I started building stuff and showing it to kindergarten show and tell. And my involvement in the movie is actually Kevin Day had brought me onto his team, which he's founded, which is called UAPX. And he discovered me and asked me to join, and I said yes, and I would do this, and that's where it began. And then of course Caroline Cory made a discovery of along with David Altman linking the
I forgot to mention I was a member of UAPX way before Caroline ever got a hold of me. I love that.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, that's where she discovered us, and then we were just a ragtag team. I mean, really, we were unproven, untested. We were in Zoom meetings with each other, but we never knew if we were going to be compatible or working together. And so, yeah, she took a tremendous risk, financing this ragtag team to do this expedition. And I brought all the equipment that you see on both rooftops. So this is, there's 2 rooftops. I supplied everything.
Three rooftops.
3 rooftop, and then
Wow.
and then there was one device I didn't bring, which was on a tripod. This is a camera with a dome and a projecting antenna, and that was purchased and supplied by Caroline Cory. And then one other device on the table. There's a radiation analyzer called the Cosmic Watch, which is owned by Matthew, and that's, those are the 2 items I didn't bring. Everything else, the big telescope, the big binoculars, 8 FLIR cameras, all of my. We didn't get a chance to show all of the inventions in the production and expedition that were utilized. So that.
And for those who don't know or haven't seen the film yet, we won't give it away, but essentially you guys wanted to get hardcore scientific evidence, like recorded evidence that even skeptics have a hard time, saying is not legitimate, right? For science-minded people. And you did it with the triangulation method, where you had 3 separate observation points, because it's easy to point something into the sky and see a light. But when you have 3 separate angles and 3 separate locations, all on that same, it's like when you get a radar hit and a visual at the same time. It's way more credible sighting, the more eyes and the more data you have on it. And the thing I was most impressed with was your machine that could take light and transform it into a waveform, giving it a unique signature. I mean, to the naked eye, light's a light. Some are more orange, more red, more whatever, but to actually make that have a unique signature, almost like the sound that a whale makes. You hear it, it's a whale, not something else. So for you to do that with lights in the sky, I thought was genius and unbelievable.
Well, thank you. And I'm actually covering it with 3 different inventions. So the movie shows the binoculars that convert the light to sound. That's actually the simplest of the circuits. And then I have night vision goggles where you can look through and have Gen 3 night vision and hear the light within that night vision. And
Amazing.
So that's a new, totally, I'm not going to say how I do it and, let people try to figure it out. But the most unique one I have, which is, I know that even most FLIR engineers aren't going to know, is the thermal camera that I re-engineered, that you can listen to temperatures that vary. So these are even cold temperatures or warm temperatures. I have a demo video, which I'm holding private right now, and some of my colleagues have seen what I've invented. But that's something that separates me from most people in this field, in that when I talk about thermal imaging and anomalous objects that are recorded, I'm a guy who actually designs circuits within these cameras. So I'm somebody who's very familiar with thermal cameras. In my company, we contracted with a thermal camera manufacturer. I can't say the name, as we contract with many other, DOD and other contractors. So I'm very familiar, and I design circuits along these paths.
He knows what he's doing.
What'd you say? I missed what you said.
I said you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing.
So there's a lot of UAPX members in this movie. Could you guys talk a bit about UAPX? Who's involved? What's it about?
Other than everybody had different roles. So I was the guy who brought the equipment and the inventions. Some of the guys supplied their story of what happened to them in the event of the Tic Tac encounter, and then you have Kevin Knuth and Matthew Sadagas, who were the PhD scientists that were looking over the data, and I was working closely with them. And had Travis Taylor. He spent some time at the site there, and I got to give him a tour of the inventions and the equipment rack that I had set up on the rooftop. And I
guess what might be easier, Dave, would be like, so we actually had 4 locations. Okay, we had on Catalina Island, we had 2 different rooftops. So one night, first it was just me, Michael Hall, and our camera guy for like the first 3 nights. And then Chrissy Newton came. So that was 3 of us looking, and then a camera guy. And about a half mile from the hotel I was at was another hotel. We would go back and forth. So we have to carry all the gear and there's no cars on Catalina Island. You got to carry everything literally by hand. Had to carry all the gear, all the camera equipment back and forth to these 2 rooftops. And then, so figure, if you actually want to say it right, it would be Catalina's one location with 3 different rooftops or 2 different rooftops. Then we had the rooftop in Laguna where Mason and the rest of the guys were. And then we had Jeremy McGowan and the Ghostbusters mobile, the Osiris. So, which was considered another location. So that's the 3 that we triangulated with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And this, like, how much of it of a strategic nightmare is it, or technical nightmare is it, when you have a triangulation like that with all the equipment that you have? Was it pretty much smooth sailing, or was there some technical issues?
I'll tell you how that happened. So I was there for 5 nights on Catalina. For the first 2 nights, we weren't able to record any of our night vision or any of our findings. I don't know what happened. It was just a mix up with communication with production, but we ended up on the island with just night vision and binoculars. No way to record anything. So if we saw something, if a UAP or UFO showed up, like, what were we going to do?
Right.
But we figured out to take our iPhones, and then we could record the night vision through that. That's the images that you see. So I had seen things the first 2 nights with my own eyes, not even with night vision. So I think it was like the 3rd night, 2nd or 3rd night, I don't remember. Chrissy wasn't there. She had left, and it was just me and Michael Hall. And that's when I see that whatever it is, I don't know what it was. I know what it wasn't. So if I had the night vision goggles, I could see it. And if I took them down, there's nothing there. So right. I see nothing. I put them on, and there's like a white orb, pulsating out there. So when we saw that a couple times, Michael Hall put his goggles on. He could see it. And that's when we called over to the other location. And we're like, hey, guys, in real time, we're like, this is what we see. Do you guys see it? And then they looked at it, and then they sent the Osiris out, and they got it. So that's the 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think Catalina Island is a hotspot. I mean, even the Tic Tac video itself was recorded in this area, right? So so before we even went out there, I did a lot of research for over a year because I didn't know the movie was happening. We were just trying to do the expedition. We weren't, if a movie happened, cool, but wasn't the main thing. We wanted to go do this, So I had met, I made some calls, and I met the editor of the Catalina Island newspaper. And he sent me a book that he wrote, Mysterious Catalina, and it's all about the UFO sightings that have been happening out there since the 40s, since before then. I have newspaper articles that are from the 1947 Catalina Island newspaper, front page, 2 airmen spot discs, and they took pictures. Same week as Roswell. It was the 7th, and then Roswell, everything was that week. So whatever that guy saw was the same thing that crashed in Roswell. It's the same thing that Kevin Arnold saw. It's the same thing that happened in Maury Island. The whole time, that whole week, from late June all the way to early July, every day on the newspaper was a sighting. So whatever it was, whatever Kenneth Arnold saw, whatever these guys saw in Catalina, whatever crashed in Roswell had to be the same thing. What are the odds that it wasn't? Yeah. So I was then introduced to a guy named Patrick who owns a company called Horizon Boats. And what he does is he's a producer for Shark Week, and Horizon, they're the company that if you want to go swim with great whites, they rent you the shark cage. That's what he does.
Okay.
Him and his team were the people that first discovered that the great whites were mating out there towards Guadalupe, and he got all the scientists out there. Became friendly with him, and he told me, and he introduced me to some fisherman captains, some not whale hunting, but the whale sightings, the tours. All these different fishermen that would have sightings, that they would report to him, and they kind of had the same stigma as pilots where they keep it quiet, but they would go to this guy and he would, get stories, and he told me. So, I mean, it's been going on there forever.
Right. Even having the testimony from Kevin Day, and even Gary Voorhees. Voorhees, how you pronounce his last name?
Voorhees,
like Jason Voorhees.
Oh, gotcha. Hearing their testimony, what it was like to, go through what they went through. Kevin Day losing his longing for his career, had to end his career short because of ridicule that he faced and all that. It's kind of nice to hear that the military is experiencing these things while they're still sticking to the stigma of don't talk about it. And if, like anybody who's had an encounter or anything like that, you want to talk about it, but the ridicule is still there. Do you think movies like this are ending the stigma at this point? Because we're getting a lot more documentaries like this. And this is the first time that we've actually had like a science expedition to boot in the documentary that actually produce results by scientific means. Louis, you're like a nuts and bolts guy. So you kind of got to see what Dave Mason did on the movie with his equipment. And you're really changing the game because you're adding different levels to observing these things, Dave. So that's kudos to you for your inventions, because it's helping ufology.
Yeah, and what really inspired it was when I was reading the documents as a kid. I kept reading about there were two phenomena that were happening along these sightings. People that were reporting their compasses were going crazy or their electronics. But the other observed phenomenon was that the objects had lights that seemed to rotate or fluctuate in intensity. And if you just rule out what would be the purpose of those lights, obviously they don't need to have lights to see where they're going, because we don't even need that in navigation today. And then obviously if it's on certain portions of the craft, it's not a byproduct of propulsion. So it only leaves you 1/3 element, when that would be, it's a form of communication.
Right.
They want to be seen.
Yeah.
They want to be seen. Now, what would be within it, since we see visible intensity, that could be amplitude modulation, but also frequency modulation. And so like what I have behind me, if you can see that 3-way light wave transmitter, I'm doing a spread spectrum transmission where I'm separating them out in spread spectrum so that when it's modulated, it is offering both frequency and amplitude modulation. And then I have another device that's built into my photodiode binoculars and into my night vision device that converts light to sound. They have a built-in defocused laser that is going to be sending out just the amplitude modulation, because if you're just deviating a standard laser, it's one frequency, so you don't get FM modulation. So you really want to spread that spectrum and see what we can get as a response, if it does implore a response.
It reminds me of like George Lucas when he was making the Star Wars movies. There are certain special effects techniques that didn't exist that he helped invent. And David Altman's wearing a Star Wars sweater right now. Man, he's a big fan. He's got Boba Fett on his hand, so he's the real deal. But the sci-fi and all the cool CGI we have now, a lot of that was an invention of necessity, right? He knew what kind of movie he wanted to make. He knew that he was going to have to invent some stuff because the market couldn't keep up with him, right? He was a savant in what his vision was. And I'm hearing a lot of that coming from you, Dave Mason, in terms of like, in order for us to capture this stuff, we need smarter equipment, better technology, and it needs to come from people who understand what it could be. Because if we're looking for stuff on radio waves like SETI, I mean, we're basically trying to converse in the most primitive means we have, right? And I like the fact that your light device would capture it, turn it into sound, and then send it back out. So if that's the language they're speaking, so to speak, by sending it back to them, it shows that, Roger, we copy and we are able to send it back to you. We can't modify it and make our own verbiage, but we hear you and we could send it back to you, just like a baby repeating what it's being told. So I thought that was really intelligent, a way to try to spook on some phenomenon, right? Better than just pointing, looking to the sky and guessing.
Hopefully they're saying something nice.
Yeah. We're not a big believer of the threat narrative, Jason and myself. I think if they wanted to do malevolent things, they could. If you're intelligent and, sophisticated enough to make it here, if you wanted us to be your slaves, we would be. I think if they've got that advance, they've used their minds, they've used consciousness. They know that you don't get 1,000 or 1,000,000 years more advanced by blowing yourself up or creating war and this type of stuff. So what are your thoughts on that? You think they're good, bad? You think they're here for any particular reason?
I think we have to demonstrate a level of intelligence, because you can't give a bunch of monkeys machine guns to defend themselves against predators. If we were to show them, we know what the result would be of that.
That's right.
In fact, if you were to arm the entire world with weaponry, you would have a catastrophic result. So we have to demonstrate something to them. But the reason why I'm also using in light is it's still the electromagnetic spectrum. And we're still playing with radios, which for whatever we're dealing with, it's that's the Stone Age. We're playing with smoke signals. And if you look at the progression of our RF technology, where the beginnings was in the kilohertz range and the megahertz range, and now we're upward to about 500 gigahertz in RF, and that's kind of the plateau as far as, and that's, I mean, an RF amplifier that's 500 gigahertz, it's about $500,000. I mean, just for that particular, if you buy it from Keysight. You look at the progression, and so by just taking something that's a light source, that now we're doing a big quantum jump and hitting 800 terahertz in the ultraviolet spectrum. So we're really showing them, hey, we do have more advanced capability of communicating with you, and you can certainly put more data on light. We're using it in fiber optic communications. I mean, it's an example of it. It's used in audio couplings and things because they find that you can put more data on it. So it only makes sense to work within that spectrum.
And fiber optic is rumored to have come from ET technology in the first place. You know, a lot of people say, you know, there's a certain timeline where our technology was growing, but not a steep curve. And then all of a sudden, with the advance of a whole bunch of things, fiber optics being one of them, it just doesn't seem to make sense.
Philip Corso.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing I disagree with is the advent of night vision technology. That actually came out in the mid 30s. And in the development of the night technology, then, if you compare the image intensifier technology to what we have today, the only difference is the introduction of what they call the microchannel plate, which acts as an electron magnifier. And that's how we've been able to take night vision and get, 80,000, 100,000 gain. And really, that's about the only thing, is the change of that and the photocathode materials and the phosphor screens. And I don't believe. I did. No, I don't believe that. And then when you look at now you look at CCD cameras, and some of the cameras that are available, the photosensitivity is really increasing. It's not at the level of night vision intensifiers, but it's getting there. And maybe in 10 years, 20 years, we're going to have solid state night vision that will rival the Gen 3 technology or Gen 4.
Well,
sorry, Jay, I was just going to say, to your point there, Dave, my wife and I have a newborn baby, and we bought a nighttime monitor. Thank you. And the night vision in this thing is unbelievable. I go in the room, it's pitch black. I can barely see the bed from stubbing my toe. And we go out in the living room, and baby is lit right up. It's like a FLIR image. And this is a $200 consumer product anybody can buy.
It probably has an infrared illuminator.
It does, yeah. But that level of technology for that amount of money, things have come way down. And obviously the cutting edge stuff now is got to be crazy, because if you can buy that as a baby monitor and it's that good, imagine what they have at the military level, or imagine some of the things you're capable of creating. It's pretty awesome. Well,
I mentioned a few times too that, like, the Phoenix, Arizona lights, if that was to ever happen again, and it probably will, the technology that we have in our pockets right now with the cell phones, like, most people will be able to capture that. Like, even the iPhones are insane cameras on these things. Like, you can really get into the pixels and all that. It's bound to happen again.
They're making full feature movies on iPhones now.
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's crazy.
I would like to do a night watch with Dave Mason. I think that'd be an amazing experience with all that technology that you would bring outside. That's pretty crazy.
If you need a few Canadian members of UAPX, I know a couple volunteers.
All right.
Put us on the list. We're ready to go here. We can watch from our vantage point. Let's triangulate Mexico, the US, and Canada, and let's see what we can do.
So in this movie, you guys actually have a few stars that are part of this as well. So it's not just the investigators from UAPX. You also have William Shatner that makes an appearance. You got Michio Kaku, which is amazing in this as well. There's a good group of people that are talking about this issue, and I think having the people from Hollywood anyways, talking about their experiences, and there's quite a few of them now coming out with, seeing things really up close. Miley Cyrus is one of those people that says she had a really close encounter. Same with her dad. So it's interesting to see how many people globally, are having these experiences, even people in Hollywood, for crying out loud. So that was really cool to see William Shatner on the podcast, the video documentary, and Michio Kaku as well, which is, to me, seems to have changed his tune. Like, he seems like he's more into the possibility of that we are being visited by something from either another dimension or from, another solar system. But either way, there seems to be something. Or
it's been here the whole time.
Yeah.
Or it's been here the whole time. We just don't have the senses. But with Dave Mason's technology, maybe we're able to, understand this phenomenon a little bit better than we have, right?
And because of his machinery, and again, I won't give away the movie, but towards the end, you guys it was only a 5-day expedition. And like you said, day one, you had phenomenon right away, but we're unable to, communicate and coordinate. But you guys quickly figured that out. And like by day 5, when you looked at your night vision, you actually replicated something very similar to what happened with the Tic Tac video. The initial reports of the Tic Tac video was it was many, and they were coming from suborbital levels right down to sea level in like a split second. And I think in the movie, you guys mentioned that you also got the same thing. It looked like it was raining Tic Tacs, and the speed was like 80,000 miles an hour. I mean, it's something just ludicrous that, we don't even think something alive could be in there with the G forces alone, but you basically were able to capture that Tic Tac again in your own way.
Yeah, that's correct. And that was just very strange, because when I was doing the video analysis of the FLIR, I was seeing something I'd never seen in the thermal cameras. And that what we saw were objects that were dropping from the sky that were in front of the camera. And this has to do with the variable persistence you get from a microbolometer in a thermal camera. And if you put an object in front of a thermal camera that's warm and then suddenly move it away, you'll get an exposure depth to it where it fades out, because it has to do with thermal recovery. And since I was seeing the variable persistence and seeing that it would start from top to bottom, I could positively identify that the object was in front of the camera and at a great distance because of the depth of field and the fact that it was transitioning from top to bottom and decaying. There was a decay factor to it. And then some of these objects appeared to be splashing in the ocean. When we had Darius from the film editor, he was going through it and using contrast methods, and he got excited because he could actually see these things were apparently splashing in the ocean. And since we knew the distance, and I knew the camera aspect ratio, and then by calculating pixel density, I was able to do some trigonometry and come up with some size and speed estimates. Now they become estimates because they were falling at different points, but what we had were variations, I think, between like 5,000 to 84,000. I mean, just some crazy numbers. And then sizes, I don't recall the sizes, but they were, some of them resembling that with the Tic Tac. And then Kevin Knuth looked at it independently and said that, and Matthew Sadagas both looked at that and concurred with my numbers. So yeah, very interesting, that phenomenon. And can't be a camera artifact, although some people will try to do that. But if they do, they're going to have to debate me on my level of knowledge of FLIR. Good luck.
So I have objects of that size falling down at that speed. You would hear a sonic boom. At least you would hear a thing. So at least a sequence of sonic booms. But these things don't do that. And they can splash into the water, and it's not like you can't hear it, which is to me.
Splash into the water at 80,000 miles an hour. Like, we don't even have anything that can go that fast.
Yeah.
No.
Let alone, make contact with another medium. That's what Lou Elizondo was mentioning when he said these 5 observables, the ability to go from one medium, air, water, doesn't seem to matter. No control surfaces, no heat, no propulsion, 90-degree turns, crazy G forces. Even if it is human made of some kind of military, if you're going to have a pilot in there, I'm a big Formula One racing fan, and Formula One is basically at the edge of, we can't make the cars any faster because we'll be detaching people's retinas in the corner.
Right.
It's the human limitation of the car, not the technology.
Not to mention blood flow, where you can actually cause somebody to go
pass out. Yeah, it's like fighter jet stuff.
I've experienced that in my own cars, so and I don't have Formula One. So.
Yeah.
No, but these things seem to operate on consciousness. I know Dr. Greer recently came out with a new documentary that talks about that, how these crafts are operated through some sort of consciousness. So it's either the pilot that's inside controls the whole craft, his consciousness extends to the craft. There's different ways, like even if you think about like a fighter jet. I got to see one really up close, and my kid got to sit in the cockpit, and I thought all they have in front of them is just this tiny little joystick, and they're at the front of the freaking plane. Like the whole plane is behind them. It's not like they have anything in front of them. So just that is to be able to maneuver in the skies and see everything at once. But these things tend to have a consciousness that sees everything at once, or is able to move and dodge and have incredible agility. That's still, to us, that's not a human pilot flying that thing.
It's likely that it's the equivalent of a drone, and we're already doing experimentations as far as looking at pilot control. We're using thoughts to do things so that they can do more rapid reactions.
It means their drones.
Yeah, and they probably just can do that with their own thought process and move these things around at will and make them appear and disappear. And really, we're in the Stone Age and trying to understand this phenomenon. And certainly if we ever come to acknowledging it or making these discoveries, it's not going to relate to anything that we understand. I mean, it's going to be beyond us.
Even the people we've had on our show in the last couple of months, guys like George Knapp and Colin Kelleher, very credible people, they're self-admitted that we used to be nuts and bolts UFO guys. And the more we learn about this, the more we realize that it's now at like the quantum level. This is about metaphysics and the Planck scale and entanglement. And because, I mean, even if you can travel at the speed of light, nobody's going to a star system that's 30 million light years away, because it's still 30 million year one-way trip, even at the speed of light. There has to be another way that these things are moving.
Actually, correction. You could, if you, let's just say I'm going to go to the nearest star, like Alpha Centauri, and if I go 99.99% the speed of light, I can make that trip. My experience will be a short time.
Yeah, that's right.
But if I return back to Earth, people will have aged 9 years, while I'm going, hey, I was just gone a couple of hours. And so you have that relativity thing. So what do you do if you're traveling interstellar and you come back and you find your friends and relatives are been dead millions of years? I mean, that's one of the
and the thing I get stuck on is there's no linear way of getting there. Even if you did point and shoot at 10 times the speed of light, you're going to hit a planet, an asteroid, something along the way, right? It's not feasible.
There is certainly particle density in outer space that to be considered, dust particles and things like that. They're accelerated. Obviously, they would impact, and
unless you have a wormhole.
And there's probably other ways of traveling, and we just haven't figured it out.
I think one of the guys on your panel, Mr. Knuth, he'd even said that within a cubic meter of volume in space, there's still one hydrogen atom. So at enough speed, there is still something there. There is resistance. It's not a total vacuum.
Right.
So that throws a wrench into any type of idea of, how fast you could actually go. What's terminal velocity in space? You need a big brain to figure that out. There's a lot of zeros in that calculation, I'm sure. Unless
you've got shields.
Yeah. Or a way of making a bubble, right? Like even Bob Lazar had theorized that somehow they're making a magnetic protection. It's a ripple or a warp in that space-time fabric. Therefore, and that would also explain maybe a living creature could survive those G-force because they're not actually feeling the G. The physics are not affecting them or the craft because they've somehow enveloped themselves, right? I mean,
there have been humanoid reportings forever, so something's coming here, unless it's already living here.
But even the acceleration to near the speed of light, it only takes. I think this is what Stanton Friedman had said, that it was if an acceleration for 1 g would get you to the speed of light in approximately 6 months. So it's feasible.
Yeah, but when you hear the reports, like even the Ariel School phenomenon, and they talk about how these entities look like almost plastic. They don't look, it's not genuine skin. It almost looks like it's coated by something, almost like it had too much Botox.
And I've seen some celebrities that resemble that.
Yeah, right.
They paid good money to look like that.
Another good movie I was able I was able to see the Ariel phenomenon. It's a really good movie. It's coming out soon.
We actually have some people from that production coming up in our next month's worth of recording. So
Awesome.
Yeah. No, but when I hear stuff like that, it makes sense that, you would have drones. You probably would have little worker bees as well. These entities, these grays might not be an actual entity. They might just be worker bees, right? We don't know. So, but it would be nice now, because we're talking about the UAP and then we're talking about aliens, and some people don't correlate the two together because we still think maybe it's Russia, maybe it's China. And I say no, because look at Russia's having a hard time with Ukraine. If Russia had that type of technology, Ukraine would be done by now, right? And then you got, China. Well, China doesn't have the technology. They're still crashing their ships on their own population, for crying out loud. So it's safe to say now that the hypotheses or the theory that these things are extraterrestrial or interdimensional is actually becoming a lot more true.
And what about the sightings, like I was talking about earlier, that happened in the 40s and before that? Like, they definitely didn't have that technology in the 40s.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Even Jacques Vallée, in his recent book, when he's talking about 1945, the crash that happened then, and the retrieval that took place. Now that happened before the Roswell incident, and the U.S. Army has had technology from somewhere else for quite some time. Like you mentioned, the fiber optics come from there. And who knows what else is going to come from allegedly. I love that word. But it's crazy to think that, even Russia may have some of that crash debris and stuff like that. Like, how much more advanced would it be for people like yourself, Mr. Mason, to have access to this sort of technology? And,
I don't think we'd be able to comprehend it. And I'll give you an example. If you were to take just your iPhone and send it to the 1970s, and give it to the most elite scientists and say, figure this thing out.
Yeah.
They're gonna, they'll be able to look at the microprocessor. Okay, we know this is an advanced microprocessor, but we really can't figure out how it's processing data.
Right.
And then if you look at, let's just go farther. So let's say I time traveled and I went back 100 years and I met up with Nikola Tesla. And I said, here's a laptop computer. Take a look at this. It would go over his head. He'd have a hard time. And if I told him what it did, he'd have some comprehension, but it would just be lost on him because he had not been shared that information. He had not had his hands on it. I'm sure if he came to this time, he'd have no problems, but just having that kind of technology. So if we take something that's 200 years advanced of us and then try to look at it and reverse engineer it, good luck. I don't think we're going to understand it or understand very little of it.
I heard that even the Aboriginals in North America, when Columbus came over, at first they couldn't recognize the boat. It wasn't until, a leader within the tribe that told the people, yeah, these things exist, then they could see it. But for days it was on the horizon and nobody could see it because they'd never seen a giant galleon boat like that. They didn't know such a thing existed, and the brain just wants to make sense of what it's seeing, and they couldn't see it until they were told it was possible, and then it kind of appeared. So I totally agree with what you're saying. Allegedly.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if this was Columbus, but it was an explorer who took advantage of his adventures where he was being fed by the natives, and then he said they weren't going to feed him, and he said, I'm going to take away the sun. And so the sun was
allegedly.
Yeah, the sun was eclipsed. Yeah, so the sun gets eclipsed, and boy, they figured out he was a god and gave him everything he wanted, but he just happened to know what was going to be happening. So, it was more of a charlatan than anything.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that was Columbus, but I may have got the names crossed with somebody else.
It was C-3PO.
Well, there's somebody I forgot who quoted it, said something in I'm paraphrasing here. Technology is so far advanced, it's indiscernible from magic. Like if it's so much more advanced than
Carl Sagan?
I'm not sure who said that, but it's a good quote.
I know it.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I'll Google it.
It sounds like a Max Planck thing to me. I'm going to go with Max Planck on that one.
You're probably right. I don't know who said
was it the dude who wrote 2001? Arthur C. Clarke.
I think it is. I think it's Arthur C. Clarke. Yeah. But I always love that quote because I thought it's true. If you know, you mentioned sending some stuff back in the day, people wouldn't be able to understand how it works. When I hear things like Bob Lazar say exactly that same thing, saying that they were trying to discover how this thing worked, but they just didn't have the science at the time to be able to solve it, and really we're just like, you know, monkeys looking at a car. We don't know. We know that it transports people, but did you get on your phone? Yeah.
Arthur C. Clarke.
There you go. So yeah, I think this is kind of like the age that we're at, is sort of that innocence, but at least consciously as a people, we're starting to pay attention more to what's going on. Even having the Congress this week, right, in the United States, that's having these open hearings, that's going to be huge, because that shows the public that actually the military and the government are actually paying attention and want to know as much as the people want to know what the hell is going on.
And bringing science to the forefront is going to be the only way to get in skeptics' mind. Going there with irrefutable data, you know, it's no longer an opinion. It's refute this or what, you know, like it's a lot harder when you have something that's legitimate, right? If it's opinion, it's easy to be, you know, typecast as an idiot, or, you know, they really believe they saw it, but they don't know what they saw.
Yeah.
When it's data, when it's in wave form, and when it comes in a science package, that's pretty hard to refute unless you have contrary data. So I think with movies like this, with objectives like this, to go out and do an expedition and let's put this in the face of some people and say, you know, say no now type of thing, right?
So, sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Right. Yeah, it'll always be refuted, no matter what data you present. I mean, if you had a Hollywood saucer landing and little green aliens coming out, and this was a real phenomenon.
If we had a body.
And all these things and repeated, there would be skeptics. There's nothing you can do to sway them. But what would really help is if more people spent time just looking into the skies, buying either binoculars or starting with night vision, and just do a sky watch and watch. I mean, you'll see satellites and meteors, and when you see satellites, you want to observe something that might be changing trajectory or speed. That's not a satellite. And that's the kind of phenomenon that will change people's minds if they take the time to do that, instead of playing on the internet, is what most people do today. And it really comes down to the preponderance of the evidence, because right now we don't have the majority of the population saying that they witnessed the phenomenon, at least admitting to it. And we have a phenomenon that we accept scientifically every day, and it's something that we take for granted, and that is a night dream. You know, if I have a night dream, I can't prove to anyone that I experienced it. But if I say, hey, I had this funny dream, this happened, everybody relates and said, yeah, I had a funny or similar dream. But the fact is, scientifically, you cannot prove your dream existed, that it actually occurred. You can hook up instruments and look at biological activity, but that's not proof. That's an observation. What makes dreams acceptable is that the preponderance of the evidence is because we know everybody experiences it, and that it gets a identity within science because of the preponderance of that. So it's accepted, but it can't be proven scientifically. But to put it into perspective, what if only 10% of the world population could perceive these dreams and the other 90% couldn't? Then that 10% would be labeled crackpots and crazies. They need medication. That type of thing is how that group would be treated. So that's kind of what it is in a nutshell. You know, we have a small group of people who have witnessed and experienced phenomenon, and the majority haven't. So they're pushed aside.
I think this phenomenon is so rampant. I mean, you guys made it a 5-day timeline. Right on day one, you started seeing things. Even though you didn't record it and have your stuff, you know, working with itself and everything wasn't communicating just yet, but right from day one, you start seeing things. So I think you're right. If more people just start looking, it's not as rare as we think. And especially in hotspot zones, it's happening all the time. And even the Tic Tac video was recorded on, not with the naked eye. There was filters and technology on the gunner footage that allowed it to become visible. So to your point of get involved with maybe night vision or something that's not as conventional as what we've been using for the last 80 years, maybe that's the secret to making this, you know, a higher percentage of people that haven't experienced. Because I think you'd agree, most people that haven't experienced, they wholeheartedly believe. Even if you don't believe them, they don't care. They know what they saw. and I don't care about your opinion. So the more people that have that, I think is healthy, because like Jason always says, abductions aren't that bad. They always bring you back, right? So, I mean, who knows?
Most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah. They don't let you float out the airlock. Yeah. But no, this movie was good because one of the things I liked is usually in science, you have to have a repeatable observation, something that you're able to observe many times. You guys, over the span of 5 days, were able to do that and capture some data, which proves that these things are actually at that location. Something at that location is actually happening. And I like that because that proves that more scientific work is warranted at this point and is needed to understand what are these things are and what these things are. And Dave, to your credit, even trying to make contact with these things is amazing. So yeah, kudos and thank you for trying to do that because I can't do that on my night watches. I have a little laser pointer, and that's about as far as I go for contact.
Or you just blind them as they fly by.
Yeah, well, that's the point. Trying to cause another crash, right, on this side of the border. So,
you got to be careful with laser pointers because they are if you point them at a pilot, you can blind their eye.
Yeah.
You could actually disrupt their instrumentation.
Yeah.
Or just cause them a panic because they see a laser beam in the cockpit. They'll think that somebody's pointing a rifle at them.
Yeah.
So it happened to a friend of mine who was training me on a Cessna. It scared him.
Yeah, I bet.
But people can just spend more time, looking and observing the phenomenon and know that you're probably going to witness things that are really hard for you to accept. I've witnessed things just with my eyes and I'm going, did I really see that? Did that really happen? Did I imagine it? It's because it's so out of the elements that your mind just doesn't accept it.
Yeah, I've spoken with enough people at this point to know that we dismiss occurrences like that very easily because if it doesn't fit into the box or narrative that we've set for ourselves, because that's what we do, that's how our mind works, then we just dismiss it. It can't be,
exactly.
If a Christian family's driving down the road, they see a flying saucer, they're not going to talk about it on their way home.
Yeah, the division is like, political parties. People vote on party lines and, this is bad, this is good. That's just kind of how this phenomenon gets observed. But one other thing I want to point out, in thermography, what I discovered was accidental. So I had a $70,000 thermal camera that was a lab standard that I took from my company back in 2005. And I just wanted to try it possibly in astrophotography because I do astrophotography. And I found that, the wavelengths aren't getting through the atmosphere effectively. So I really can't use it for that application. And I thought, I'll record some commercial jets flying overhead. That'll look cool. So I just wanted, and this was on an afternoon sunny day, and I'm panning the camera around, and I see two very large objects in the field of view of the camera, which would have been about 10 moon lengths, about 5 degrees of width in apparent field of view. And I looked straight up, and there was absolutely nothing up there. I couldn't see a thing. And I recorded these objects and got it video recorded. And when I reviewed the video, they moved slow and they measured -30 Fahrenheit, but they were invisible to the human eye. And that was very strange. And then to further add to it, there have been occasions where I've recorded objects appearing in unknown objects in thermal cameras or 2 thermal cameras, and then taking my night vision out and observing and not being able to see it with Gen 3 night vision, but I could see it with it. And these are just kind of cylinder-shaped objects, V objects. They're not bird flocks. They're not anything of ours. They
not
always
seagulls.
measure cold.
Yeah.
Some of them measure down to minus.
Sized.
I've had some go down to -80 Fahrenheit is what they measured in the thermal camera. And people don't understand that because thermal cameras can measure cold temperatures and give you quantitative values. I don't know what these things are. I just know what they're not.
Yeah. So here we are looking for something that's going to fit in our field of vision, whereas these things can exist in the other, spectrum that we can't see. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not stranger than you think. It's stranger than you can think.
It is strange because if you put it in perspective of wavelengths, our visual spectrum is between about 400 to about 750 nanometers, give or take 50 nanometers. And then night vision will typically cut off at 1,000 to 1,100 nanometers. And I'm recording these objects between 13,000 and 14,000 nanometers, so much longer wavelengths. And for whatever reason, they're appearing in those temperatures, or cold temperatures, or wavelengths, as it becomes the same thing. And who knows what these objects are? They have odd shapes. They're cylinders, they're solid triangles, they're V formations. Often V formations flying backwards, so they're not.
And then also a lot of the times Dave has caught like V-shaped objects with a companion next to it.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've got one. I've got one where it's a V object
I'll send you one.
with a V object with a what do you call it? A rectangle. It was a rectangle that was next to it. Another one that just had a dot. And one of the best ones I have is a trifoil, or it looks like a clover leaf, and I caught it on two separate FLIR cameras. And one camera captures this thing going across, and then this was on September 30th, 2019. And then a commercial jet is recorded, and this object's following it. And the commercial jet is completely off the calibrated temperature span of the camera. So the camera was spanning at a cold temperature range. And it's just this white hot blooming commercial jet, but you can clearly see that's what it is. And then following it is this trifoil, looks like three spheres that are very close to each other that are following it, but they're very cold. I think they were below like minus 60 Fahrenheit. I have to re-examine this thing. And it doesn't make sense. And then if you go, well, somebody could argue and say, oh, well, this just means it's our stuff. And I said, well, you've got to do the trigonometry on the camera field of view. And if it is, and if you're saying they're indicating their environment, now you've got another problem. It doesn't make sense. So I had a meteorologist, William Puckett, who runs UFOs and W, and he examined one of my videos it was a cold V object that transitioned. And we had the temperature readout. And since he knew what the altitude of the object, he calculated that it was at 90,000 feet. And then so I did the trigonometry on it. I said, well, according to this and the camera aspect ratio, which we knew, this object therefore has to be 2,200 feet across. That's nearly half a mile. That's crazy.
Jeez, I mean, that's nuts.
So we know that can't be real. I mean, unless it is. But it certainly is. We're not putting objects over that. And then flying it over commercial airspace where I reside, and I know how highly controlled the airspace is, because I'm not too far from SeaTac Airport or Renton Field or Crest Field or Boeing Field, or there's several airports. And I was taking Cessna lessons from Renton Airport, and I know how highly controlled everything's navigated. You're not going to be flying Black Project aircraft within these vicinities over highly populated areas, and how you can make them cold temperature, and it still defies the laws of physics. And that's even if I apply the parameters of object emissivity within thermal cameras, and you take into account the variables trying to simulate what would replicate that, and I can't find any solution on it.
That's crazy.
The lack of heat is a big thing. I mean, everything we know in terms of propulsion gives off heat, even friction.
Yes, absolutely. You're correct. And how do you overtake that? The SR-71 would get to like close. I forgot the numbers. It was like 500 Fahrenheit or something at top speed on the surface of the titanium. It was pretty much limited by temperature because it didn't want that thing to explode.
And the space shuttle too, it's covered, when it was running, covered in ceramic tiles just so that it wouldn't blow up upon re-entry like a meteor. So if these things are interstellar, they're coming through that same firmament that our own space shuttles have to go through. And if they are susceptible to the laws of physics, how do they dissipate the heat?
Yeah, they can't. I mean, you look at our meteors that fall from space, the 20, 30,000 miles an hour, and they vaporize, they burn up and they explode. We don't even have elements that we can accelerate at that speed without having it fall apart and break up. Yeah. So, when people say, oh, this is our military technology, and what I see what's happening, and it's happening on so many different fronts, is somebody puts up a website and just makes stuff up. And then it gets copied and pasted on all these other websites, and then it gets indoctrined as factual. And so it becomes a standard, but there's no proof behind it. And that's what's really going on in this phenomenon from people that are putting out, a narrative on this matter, and often they're doing it under self-promoting or trying to do something to make money on it, and they try to find an angle, and it's so much false information that we have to deal with when certainly searching online.
Yeah,
Hey,
a lot
Dave,
of fake videos as well. So
we have a question from the audience for David Mason.
Yeah.
From this is on Twitter. Old Vet Symposium would like to know how you were able to teach your parrot to play guitar. You said your bird is better than he is.
Oh, I have a Kai parrot. I've actually got two, and little Sophie, she's very curious about things, and she was playing when I was playing my guitar. I play fingerstyle guitar, recorded a CD, and she would jump on my shoulder and try to pluck the strings. And one day I was just in this office here, and I had my guitar sitting on a stand, and she just flew over to it and started playing on it. And I tried to get my iPhone next to her to get video, and she'll attack the iPhone. If I pick it up, she doesn't like me talking on the phone. So I had to kind of do it in secret, and I just caught her playing the guitar. It's a video that's gone crazy. It's at over 500,000 views now on YouTube, and so it's pretty funny.
You went viral.
Yeah.
All right, guys, Tear in the Sky, where can people find this documentary, and when was the release date? That was it didn't happen that actually
May
the release
3rd.
Was May 3rd, right? Yes.
Yeah. It's on Amazon, iTunes, Apple Store, Vimeo. Last I checked, we were number 5 for iTunes documentary. We were number 2. But then Michael Jackson came out and, knocked us down, and Randy Rhoads. And on Apple, we were number 8 of all-time independent releases.
Nice.
Yeah, it's doing really good.
Yeah, documentary that we both watched and enjoyed. Definitely worth watching to see how these guys did what they did at Catalina Island. Louis, we're just going to say a little hello here to Jonathan Gilmet in Belgium, Sunny Sandu here in Canada, and Dale Brown in USA. Just shout out to these guys this week on UAP Studies Podcast. Dave, I appreciate your time. Louis, did you have any final questions for our guest today?
No, I just wanted to say there's also a cool part in this movie dealing with a portal. We won't give it away, but if you haven't seen the movie, it's definitely worth watching. And again, alleged portal in the sky. But your gear caught it. So good on you guys. And thanks so much for being on the show. We look forward to chatting with Caroline Cory next Monday, and she can give us a little more insight from her inspiration and the reason she wanted to make this project happen. So thanks again, guys. It's been a blast.
Hey, thanks very much.